guys, welcome back to the Counteract Podcast. My name is Allison Lind. I'm the host of the Thursday Human Interest segment, and I am coming to you guys today with a bit of a logistically different setup. For those that are watching on YouTube, you can tell that I'm not in my apartment. I am actually in the staff room at the maternity home that I work at, so I'm recording this. I just got done with my shift. And then this episode is also an interview that is recorded over Zoom, and I'm still figuring out how to do virtual interviews with a better audio setup. So the audio in this video is going to be, or the audio in this podcast is going to be a bit wacky. So just outright saying that, please bear with us as we figure out how to do these bigger and better things for the podcast. Nonetheless, I am so excited for you guys to hear from our guest. It's one of my very, very close friends named Grace Fisher. We actually just met in December of 2023, so our friendship is not even a year old, but the Lord has really moved through our friendship and used each of us to work in the other person's life. And yeah, so I just wanted to bring Grace on, really to hear her testimony and just have a good life-giving conversation. This episode is going to be in two parts, but both parts really center around the power of testimony and how good and life-giving it truly is to just speak of what the Lord has done. There are so many scriptures that talk about how beneficial it is to talk about the goodness of our God, so that others can experience the same thing that he's done in our lives. And not only that, but it helps us to remember his faithfulness, because we can be just so forgetful as, little human beings. So to remember the Lord's faithfulness is such a beautiful form of worship, I'm realizing, and a beautiful form of fellowship. And so this episode really just reflects that in the conversation form. I hope you guys find it encouraging. I hope you find it thought-provoking. I hope you find it entertaining, because our story is really silly. We actually tell both sides of one testimony, both of our perspectives of one testimony that the Lord specifically did. We both got to be a part of it, but we were going into it and coming out of it with very different experiences. And so we talk about that. But that's in next week's episode. Yeah, I hope you guys really love hearing from Grace, hearing her testimony, and stay tuned for part 2 next week. Without further ado, I'm going to read to you guys a message from our sponsors, and then we'll get into the episode. So, you guys know about Patriot Mobile, right? If you do, then you know that they are America's only Christian conservative wireless provider, and they like to put their cause ahead of their profits. They offer dependable nationwide coverage, meaning that you get access to all 3 major networks, giving you the same exact coverage that you are accustomed to, but you don't have to put your money into a corporation that is going to fund causes that you don't support. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you support the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the sanctity of life, our military, veterans, and first responder heroes, and the 100% US-based customer service team that makes switching super easy. They will let you keep your number, keep your phone, keep your upgrade, and they'll help you find the best plan for your needs. All you have to do is go to patriotmobile.com/counteract or call 972-PATRIOT. You can get free activation when you use the code COUNTERACTUSA. Once again, that is patriotmobile.com/counteract or 972-PATRIOT. Join Counteract USA and make the switch today. Okay, guys, without further ado, we're getting into the episode. I hope you enjoy. All right, Grace, could you start by just telling the listeners who you are and what you do?
Yes, so I'm Grace. I just graduated from Marymount. I don't know why that's always the first thing I say. It's like, oh, what school do you go to? I live in Oregon. I went to school with Allison here. and got my musical theater degree, so a BFA, and graduated a year early, which is awesome. But I live in Oregon, like I said. I have four siblings, and I'm a little bit of a like granola-esque gal. I think, yeah, I would describe myself as kind of someone who's like city person, but also like whenever I retreat back to Oregon, I'm just like, that is my like territory. I love it. So I
Really?
don't
Well,
know if that really answers the
no, that's perfect.
little bit about me. So
Yeah. No, it's perfect. You were raised on a farm, right? Like, or
yeah. I mean, I was raised until I was like 8, I lived in a neighborhood. So like I always tell people like, yeah, I was raised on a farm because like it just sounds cool. And then I like remember I'm like, no, wait, I scootered to my friend's house.
oh
Like
my gosh.
that's like literally what I did until I was 8. But yeah, then we moved to a farm. We had like so many sheep at one point, like 10 sheep, 3 goats, 50 chickens, like so many animals. And then it just got way too intense to take care of. And it was like getting up every morning, get the eggs, feed the sheep, do the goats. Like, actually, side tangent, fun little story. This is actually not a fun little story. Our sheep one time was like, she was pregnant. And so she had a ram, which is like a boy sheep, but like he got so violent that like I was like going to like feed the chickens or something one day or like collect the eggs and I was so scared to go in there like because he would like run into me all the time and like hit me. It was like
Gosh.
so scary. Um, but also we got to ride the sheep. Like we would like hop on their backs and like
Yeah,
so it evened itself out.
totally. Yeah,
But yeah,
I feel like everyone really romanticizes farm life, but like the farm kids, like there's living on a farm is not like it's kind of a horror story. Like you're always seeing dead animals and getting rammed by ram.
so many dead animals. We
Yeah.
literally saw one time out our window a bald eagle like reach down and grab a chicken, like pick it up and fly.
Oh no.
We were like, so that's where they've been going because we like
Oh,
had 50 and then we had two. It was crazy.
oh
But
my gosh.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, it teaches you about the circle of life, perhaps.
I feel desensitized. I
Yeah,
like literally am like nothing scares me anymore. I like I won't get into that. I've seen things.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I love that. So yeah, New York was naturally just like the next place to go for
Right, exactly. Totally had nothing to do with what I was
you.
like my life growing up.
Yeah.
So crazy.
No, that's so cool. And we'll get into like, how you got to New York, all that fun stuff. But my next question for you is, how is it with your soul?
Um, my soul I think, okay, so I guess for the listeners out there, I graduated and then had like a few weeks left in the city and then came back to Oregon to kind of just like regroup, figure out my life, sort of like if I was, because I kind of was on the fence of like, am I going back to the city? Is that where like the Lord is calling me? So I decided, like, since being home actually pretty recently, that I do feel like I want to try and get back out there. So, all that being said, my soul, at the end of the day, it's good. However, I feel like it's also been, my soul kind of feels weary, and it's just like, I don't know. I think it's been just a really big season of change. I think for a lot of people that are our age, like that is a really relatable topic, or just like season of life is just the season of change. So yeah, I think in the midst of all of it though, I've like felt really like down at times to be honest, and like since being home it's like not been easy, like being so independent for like 3 years of your life or 4 years, however long you're in school for, it's like you come back and you're trying to figure out the new dynamic that your family has, or like settling into oh my gosh, I can't speak, a dynamic that you haven't been a part of for a while. And so it's like just navigating that is harder than I thought it would be. I think I had expectations coming into going home that it would just be like super restful, super easy right off the bat. And then I realized, I was like, whoa, this is like not what I thought it was going to be. It's a lot harder. Um, but I've like, as in the past, or I guess as of the past week, I feel like the Lord is like showing me that I need to have a little more grace for myself, that it's not going to look how I thought it was going to look, like being home, and
Yeah.
that He's doing something different. So, to answer your question, my soul is good because I know the Lord is good and He's working. But I think if I'm like totally being honest, I've not been great just given how I thought I was going to be. You know, like my expectations were not met, so I was disappointed. But I think now with kind of this new perspective, I feel like I'm on the up and up, and I'm just kind of like letting the Lord cook.
Yeah, let him cook.
So I'm gonna let him cook.
Yeah.
But I'm good. Like today is great. Like in the midst of kind of just feeling a little off or like in a funk, like I've had great days, and it's okay to be in a funk. And I think I've like kind of let myself live in that space for a little bit. Because the thing with me, and I'm sure like other people out there can relate, is like I'll be in a funk and then I'm automatically I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's wrong with me? Like why am I feeling this way? And like how can I get out of it as quick as I can? Instead of letting myself like rest in that space for a second and like acknowledge it and like give myself grace to be in that spot for a second. Because I think we're so quick to try and just be great all the time and be like doing good and like have your poo together. And like it's just not always, that's like not how life goes. Like life just isn't that way. Um and so I think just kind of allowing yourself the space to acknowledge, okay, I don't have the same schedule that I had in school. I don't have like my routine anymore. I'm completely in a different season right now than I was like even a month ago. So it's like allowing yourself to just be okay with that because it's
Yeah.
not going to be comfortable. And the only way to get through it is to go through it.
Mhm.
Um, so, yeah, that being said, my soul is well, but it's not been completely like a straight line being home. It's been like up and down and
Yeah.
all around, and that's just the
Yeah.
way that things go sometimes. So,
I'm going to add context for the listeners, but a while back, we had a friend pray over Grace that she would be in, how did she word it? Like essentially that there would be just this layer of anesthesia over you, like
oh my
healing.
gosh,
And
yes.
and so we've joked around that she's in her anesthesia era.
Yes.
And but what's so interesting about that is like, right, like you're coming out of like heart surgery and
Hmm.
going home is like that time of recovery. But like post surgery is not always easy.
Totally.
Like
That's so
anesthesia
encouraging.
isn't always pleasant.
Yeah.
Healing, like obviously has to be like rocky. And so maybe that discomfort is like, I don't know,
Hmm.
like God is still being faithful and still doing his work. And so I'm sad that you're feeling that way, but it kind of
No.
makes sense that it would be happening like
Yeah.
city.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It's really validating because I haven't thought of that, of at least how I've been feeling associated with that. And I think that totally makes so much sense because it's like, okay, after you go through whatever healing journey, for the listeners, I think like the past few months leading up to like leaving, I had like some really great like prayer time that like the Lord revealed to me, just like things that needed to be prayed through and all that. So it's like coming out of that, I think it was like 0 to 100, really quick of like being in the season of really intense prayer and like seeking the Lord so intensely. And then going totally to a different state, being like, not even in that same realm. And I think too, this is a little bit of a side tangent, but it reminds me of just like we're, I guess, like if you've grown up in a Christian household or like you're a part of like a super, like,
Mhm.
I guess, I don't know how you would, yeah, just like really involved with your church. Like, I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in like, oh, we need to be like proclaiming the word of the Lord 24/7, always like on our Jesus grind 24/7, getting in our word and like like having all these super high intense experiences with Jesus. And I've come to realize just like through even you, Allison, like talking with you and like other leaders in my life, just like that sometimes too, like you can, there's such thing as like being spiritually drained too, and like feeling like you need just like, I guess it's just a matter of understanding the season you're in. Like you were saying, like, okay, I was in my healing era, and now I could be in my like anesthesia era. So it's like I'm not necessarily right now, at least I don't feel the Lord calling me into like this super intense spiritual era because I feel like He's doing other things in my life and filling my cup in other ways to prep me for another era, another season of my life. I guess we use this term so much now, but
Arrows. Right.
yeah, it's like I know we use it like so unironically now. It's
I know
just
it started ironically and now it's just just the
it's
lingo.
so funny. But yeah, it's like it's not bad. Like I used to think that it was negative, to be in a season where you didn't feel like
Yeah.
so much of the presence of the Lord, but it's like we shouldn't be seeking the feeling, we should be seeking relationship. And it's so hard sometimes to not like compare your faith to what other people's faith is looking like or other people's walk with the Lord or their journey.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's definitely, yeah, it's been like, that's, I think, yeah, even talking about it now, I'm like, wow, that like totally is makes sense because our all of our journeys are going to be different.
Totally.
Yeah, it's the same thing for anything in life. Like, I can't expect, you know, like my degree to look like your degree because we got completely different degrees. Like,
Yeah.
it's not gonna be the same thing.
That makes me think of a quote from Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis, where he talks about one one tactic of the enemy is to get the Christian when he's gotten to the point in his faith where like God, he holds our hand in the beginning like a father does to a toddler, but eventually we must learn to walk on our own. And that's the season of not feeling that like necessarily like strong intimacy or like that crazy spiritual power. And like the enemy like knows our father. And so that's when he like pounces. He knows that like
Yeah,
that would be a season where we're questioning, but where God is still good and sovereign. And yeah, it's just this idea of like comparison. And we
yeah,
all fall into it. I mean, I read that book like right before I entered one of those seasons, and I still found myself feeling that way too, where it was like, why am I not feeling like as
so
close to God? Why am I not? And it's, yeah, but it's like such a crucial part of the Christian walk. And it's so
yeah,
beautiful when we experience that, even through the hardship. Because I think, yeah, it teaches us, like, I mean, what you said, like, it's like you still know that God is good and he's working and he's been faithful through all of it. And it's really like, yeah, I just see you coming out of this season so much like stronger in your faith and more mature spiritually.
thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I think it's such a, like you said, it's such a beautiful season because I think it feels like you're distant, or it feels like you're not doing enough, or like not going deeper in your faith or whatever. But I think it almost like challenges us to, in the midst of that feeling, push, like lean in further. And like
Ah,
I've found myself even like, because one of the things that I like struggle with, and like I've talked to you about this too, Allison, and I'm sure other people can relate, but like getting in my word and actually like reading my Bible every day is so hard for me. But even in this past week, like even reading my Bible 3 times a week is a lot for me. And like I've read my Bible 3 times this week. Like that is like such a praise now that I'm thinking about it, because it's like I have not necessarily been feeling like the presence of the Lord, but I've been like, almost because of that, I'm like more hungry. I'm like, where did you go, God? And so he's like directing me to the word of the Lord to like learn his voice and like seek him further, even when I don't feel it. And I think that I'm honestly now just realizing like what a beautiful thing that is, and how merciful the Lord is for giving me that. You know what I mean? Because like if I had felt his spirit, I wouldn't be in my word because I would think I'm okay.
wow.
Okay, okay, God.
Yeah. Wow.
Um,
That is the work of the Lord. Like just,
that's
as
for
someone
the
who's known
Lord.
you for like so many months and yeah, wow, he is so good. And that's so cool that he like it
Yeah.
I feel like I'm realizing too during this season where you've been really like strong at prayer, I feel like, and being like in his spirit. I'm not as strong in that regard. And I've been trying to lean into the prayer aspect. And
Totally.
it blows my mind when God like actually does what he's says he's gonna do or like
Right.
answers prayers. It's like,
He
okay,
like,
God, like help me
yeah,
be better at prayer. Like let me hear from you. What does your voice sound like? And then he's
yeah.
like, hello, Allison, this is what I sound like. And then I'm like, what? Oh, you actually did it. Like, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. It's
So
like catches us off guard, and it's
yeah.
like it shouldn't though, because he literally says he's
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
like you knock and like he's going to get, like you seek him and you will find him. Like that is
Like that is his
word.
promise.
It's literally his word. It's in the
Right.
Bible. Like
Exactly. And like
so
he's still like a living, breathing like God
right.
who's involved in our lives. It's just a little mind blowing even after all these
That's
years.
so funny. I know, we're so forgetful.
Oh yeah.
Like, we're so forgetful, and I just, I even like, I mean, we'll talk about it later, but with the carry the love thing, I'm just like, he was so faithful. Gonna be different only a little bit later? Like, the world has been going like well before we were even born. So, like, why would he change now? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
if he's been the same, why now would he change? And we're just so, yeah. I'll
Yeah.
speak for myself. I'm so forgetful.
No, me too.
I am like number one forgetful
Yeah. Oh
over here, like queen of forgetfulness of like his faithfulness.
my gosh. Yeah, but that's honestly that's like the human condition. Like Israel is marked for forgetfulness. I think literally the name of Israel is he who wrestled with God.
Mm.
Like yeah, I mean, the whole Old Testament is just marked by Israel forgetting the promises. And like, yeah, it's just such a beautiful representation of
Where that got them, right? Like that sounds so cynical, but it's true. It's like he he will not fail us. Like he is the provider.
totally.
So
Yeah. And he's just so patient for that too.
oh my word, I would be pissed out of my mind if I had a child like me. If my daughter is anything like me, oh my word. No, I'll love her the same. But like, still, the amount of patience that it requires for us, you know, like
Yeah,
he's so merciful always.
he is. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that.
Oh my gosh, thank
Um,
you.
yeah,
It honestly was so good to talk about it. I feel like this conversation already. I feel like I haven't like actually, it's just, it feels good to acknowledge where the Lord is working in your life because you can't always see it, you know? So
Totally.
it's
Yeah.
good
And
to
it's cool for me to hear. Like, this is what I'm learning. And also what I like want to do more with the podcast is just like testimony is so powerful and it's always happening. Like there's a testimony for every season, every prayer. Like, so
acknowledge.
hearing that to me, like that's testimony. Like that's, active proof of what the Lord is doing in your life. And it's inspiring to witness as a friend. And I
Thank you.
want to like share that more, I think, through this like podcast because yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool.
It's also like for me giving that like talking to you about this, it's like reminding me of the Lord's faithfulness and where he's working in my life because sometimes I don't always feel it. I'm like, okay, God, I don't see you in this season, but it's like talking to another believer about it just reminds me even like, oh my gosh, how could I have been so blind to where he's moving? Because, yeah, it's hard not to feel just kind of stuck, when you're in certain seasons. It's like, oh, well, this is just, it'll blow over. But it's like, why wouldn't we try and still be proactively seeking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. Kind of going into your walk, your spiritual walk a little deeper. How long have you known Jesus, and can you share a snippet of your testimony with us?
Yes, I've known Jesus pretty much my whole life, but I didn't accept him till I was like 5. So that's still pretty much my whole life, I would say. Um, my testimony, I feel like for like junior high and high school, my walk with the Lord looked the same and I just didn't know anything different. It was kind of just all like, yeah, everything was super comfortable. I'd like maybe experienced like a few things that I was like, whoa, this is like faith, like, um, where I like was challenged a little bit, but like even still, like after that, it would go back to the same, like just very comfortable living. Not that my faith was like, I wouldn't say I was lukewarm, but like kind of going back to understanding the season you were in. Like, I just wasn't in a season yet where I was like ready, I don't think, to be put into that next level of like my walk with the Lord. So yeah, my faith for a long time, and I'm sure like a lot of people who have grown up in Christian homes can relate, but it was like my parents' faith for a while and just my church's faith, what I was so used to and just like what was comfortable for me. Um, all of that was the same except for in high school, I like fell into really like a dark spot in my life. So like everything was consistent. My faith looked the same, except for on top of that, I was now like struggling, you know?
Yeah.
So mentally, I was, and I would say like, yeah, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I was really struggling. Um, and like the Lord felt so far from me because I think that was the first time I'd actually experienced the enemy and like his lies and his attacks.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it fell into a really awful spiral of guilt and shame. Um, and just like really believing all of the things that the enemy would tell me, like you're like an awful person, you're so like you're unworthy. And so it came to a point where I believed, even still, it's so hard. Like, I oftentimes believe more of the enemy's lies than the Lord's truth, which
Mhm.
is so weird that our minds do that. And
Mhm.
again, I'll speak for myself, like, my mind does that. Um, but yeah, I was so isolated too in this season of my life to where I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't think that like that anyone else was like struggling in the way I was struggling, or like feeling the same dreadful feelings I was feeling. So I finally was able to like talk to my mom a little bit, and I got set up with like a counselor or like a therapist, and like was able to that was probably the first time I'd ever encountered the Lord in the way that I had, like really encountered the Holy Spirit. I remember doing this exercise with her that it's so hard. It makes me like hate the enemy so much for how much damage he caused and how much of a victim I was because of the enemy. Um, but like I'm also grateful because even in the midst of it, the Lord is using it for his glory, even still to this day. But like, I just remember I was sitting in like my therapist's office, and she was a believer too. So she was able to like really counsel me in ways that were like productive because it was centered in truth and like centered in who the Lord says I am. Um, but I just remember like sitting on her couch and then like closing my eyes, and she was like, okay, now like picture like the Lord is, I don't know if she like told me to picture the Lord is beside me or whatever, or if I just like felt him literally sitting next to me. But I felt like the Lord so strongly in that room for the first time, like than I'd ever felt before. Um, and even to this day, I would say that was like one of the turning points in my faith, was like that moment where I was like sitting, like literally broken down, like in so much pain, but like necessary pain to like move through to the other side of what the Lord was trying to like bring me out of.
Mhm.
But I just remember him like sitting next to me and like rubbing my back. And it was like the first time I'd actually experienced like, oh my word, I have a kind father. I have like someone who loves me in a way that I could never even explain. You know, it's something that only can be experienced. And for so long, and even still, it's so hard for me to like train my brain out of comparing our heavenly father to our earthly fathers. And it's still like a constant battle of like, okay, my father in heaven is kind and gentle and he's perfect. And yeah, he's all of these things that our earthly fathers or earthly father figures or even just people in our life could ever be.
Mhm.
Um, And so I think that that experience kind of just like has marked my faith forever, and my testimony forever was like feeling him in that moment for the first time. And then I moved to New York when I was 17, started school, and it was hard at first. Like, so after that experience, I felt equipped to go to New York, but it's so funny because I thought I was going for musical theater. And like looking back now, I'm just like, oh, silly, silly goose. Like you were not going for musical theater. Um, but that's what got me there, you know, like that's what like the Lord put in my life to get me to the city that he was gonna literally change my life in. And that sounds so cliche given that it's New York. But like, yeah, like my faith looked so different when I moved to the city. And I'm not saying that it's the city that changed my faith. It's like the Lord that changed my faith in that city. I just so happened to be in New York, but he like did a number on me.
Yeah.
So you can be, for all the listeners, like you can be anywhere. This is not your call to move to the city. That's between you and the Lord. But like
Yeah.
wherever, yeah, whatever the Lord is calling you into, wherever, like just be open to like what he's gonna do, because he can totally, yeah, do a number on you. So 17, went to an incredibly worldly school, just like fully unlike anything I'd experienced before, especially because I grew up going to, I like to tell people it's like kind of like wasn't even private school. I was like homeschool light. So like I would do like a bunch of different like co-ops with other students that were also like had families like homeschooling their kids. Um, and then I did community college where I did like dual enrollment. So I got like my part of high school credit and part of college credit, which is why I was able to graduate early. Praise the Lord. Yeah, so I hadn't experienced what it had been like, to be in a kind of environment like that intensely, So it was I was just like, okay, this is just the normal, like this is just how it is. And so for like my freshman year, for a lot of it, I was so on and off with church, really didn't go because I think most of it was fear. I was too scared to like step out into the city, um, or like not even into the city. I was too scared to like put myself into a new community because,
Yeah.
and looking back now, I'm like, that was so the enemy just like feeding me lies of like, okay, you're not gonna. I knew community was out there, but I was so held back by like my own fear.
Hmm.
And the moment I decided, which fast forwarding to like maybe my sophomore year, my I had another moment with the Lord at that church. So then I'd been going to Church of the City a little bit more, got plugged in with a community group that wasn't College NYC yet, because that didn't exist. And then my cousins came to one of the services. We were at like the 5 p.m. or I think it was like the 6 p.m. or something at the time. Or no, it was the 5. Doesn't matter. One of the evening services. And I just like remember getting this like amazing prayer where I thought like the Lord had healed me and like he totally had, but he was like getting at more of the roots. Like again, I'll always say like your healing journey is not gonna just be like linear. It's gonna like be up and down and you might think you're healed from one thing, but like the Lord in his mercy will like work on you periodically.
Yeah.
He did it all at once. Like I was if he had healed me in every way that I needed at one time, I would have like died, I think.
Right. There would have been nothing left of like, yeah.
I like would have withered away.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, that night was another moment where I was like, this is marking my faith. This is like changing me forever. So from that night on, I was like, no more games. Like I'm going to commit to plugging into this community. I'm going to commit to going to church every single Sunday. And yeah, and what's so crazy is that at that time, College NYC was also getting started. So I literally asked about a college community and they were like, well, there's something in the works and it's College NYC. And so I went to the first night of College NYC and have been going ever since. And that I think is where the Lord really started. That's so funny. I feel like right now, like history is almost repeating itself. I went through like a crazy season of healing, came out on the other side, like running. And now I feel like, again, I'm in this crazy season of healing. And I think on the other side, I just had like a little circle moment, which is so cool. But I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not going to put any expectations on it. I've seen where that's got me. So I'm going to let the Lord cook, like I said. But anyway, with that came so many incredible friends. That's where I met Allison, to all of our viewers or listeners, which is so crazy. I didn't realize how many believers were in Marymount. I was so cynical to believe that there wasn't any believers in Marymount. And then the Lord kept bringing so many people into my life that were like, I love Jesus too. And people that I would meet at church first and
Yeah,
then find out they go to Marymount after the fact. That's how Allison and I met.
totally.
Crazy story.
Yeah.
So weird. And yeah, like I'm gonna side tangent. That's sort of my testimony right now. It leads into carry the love. It leads
Yeah.
into other things.
Okay, guys, that is it for this part of the interview. Stay tuned for part 2 next week, where we move on from just Grace's individual testimony and into how the Lord moved in her life and in my life through an event that we put on called Carry the Love. We really start to recognize the awe and the wonder that it creates to just tell the testimony of what the Lord has done in our lives. So stay tuned. I really hope that you guys will find encouragement from it. I love you guys so much, and I will see you next week.